Welcome to the Fantasy NASCAR podcast, Martinsville 2025 Cup Series picks. Longtime listeners know I lived down the road from Martinsville. I am biased. I love this track. Although Southside Virginia may not be the fanciest place on the earth, they are very good people. It's a very good racetrack. Before we get into the picks, talking about giant themes and storylines, let me throw out there racefortheprize.com. This is where you can get access to the fantasy NASCAR spreadsheet, all the tools, all the AI analysis that I run. $25 for April. And if you're new, I'll go ahead and throw in Martinsville. So buy April now if you haven't, and I'll throw in Martinsville if you don't have it. It's a great deal. The reason why I offer this great deal is because I know once you start going through the data, looking at the analysis, you will come back. If you're watching this podcast, then that means you don't like to tail picks. You don't like to listen to just ownership simulations. You like to dive into the numbers. So if you like to dive into the numbers, here are the numbers. Tons of data. Where do we start? I'm going to start with Austin Cindric. This might not be on most people's radar. I think it will be by the end of the week. Not that I am the trendsetter. Well, probably am, but I hope that people just look at the data. And if you look at the data, you have access to the data, you will clearly like Austin Cindric. Not just that, oh, he's got 2 top 10s, he finished 11th in 2022. No, we look at the real hard data in the spreadsheet. And if you can discern between lap times and also taking into context racing situations, you will realize that Cindric was really fast. That 4th place finish should have probably been a win. So let's look at the data. And we'll know he starts in the back. And so he has to navigate traffic all the way through during the early stages. But you also notice that he's able to make his way forward and slowly work his way forward through the 500 laps in the fall race. Not easy to do. You also notice that, again, he has to go through a penalty and has to start further back again and work his way through a second time. And yet he's still able to climb through, right here, that was a bad pit stop. He has to climb through the field a second time, navigating traffic, where you're going to eat up your tires, where you're going to lose speed. And yet he's still able to make it all the way to the front. And even here, where he skips a pit stop on the last stage to gain track position. And I know most people are going to point, well, he didn't pit there. That's how he got those spots. That is true, but for the last 100 laps, he's not on the freshest set of tires. And yet he's still able to maintain position on this very soft tire that everyone else is wearing out. So that's another feather in his cap. And we can look at the tire times. And I ran this through AI after I had come to my conclusion, and it pretty much verified it. And we can just simply look at the very end of this race where his tires are older than other drivers, and he's still putting up pretty good lap times, having a lot less tire wear than other contenders. The guy did an excellent job at managing tire wear, and I really believe that Cindric is one of our favorites. Blaney's right up there as well. Penske overall looked pretty good. Tire management, and it's not a surprise. Penske's always good at Martinsville, but you have to be really excited about them. But the point here is that everyone's always excited about Blaney at Martinsville, and usually pretty bullish on Logano. But I don't think Cindric gets enough credit for what he has done at Martinsville, what his crew chief Brian Wilson's done at Martinsville in the multiple series. And early in the week, I think he's off the radar. After this podcast, I'm sure he's going to get talked up a lot. Now, I hope that's because people will have done the data and not just listen to my podcast. All right, second thing I want to talk about is Hendrick tire wear. The drivers, you can read the articles, complained about falling off, tire wear, lacking long run speed, and we see that with Byron, and we see that with Larson in the data. So not only did they remark about this during the race or after the race, but they also have the data that suggests that they may not be contenders. They may not be in the same category as Penske. If we were simply looking at long runs managing this new soft tire, softest tire in history of NASCAR, something to be concerned with. Elliott's numbers are a little bit better, but Elliott had the same issues, and he also went with a different pit strategy that helped him have a little bit better of a position. So he went with a 3-stop strategy and caught a caution. And if he probably would have run the same strategy as Larson and Byron, then he would have finished a lot worse. Denny Hamlin, I think you're going to have to put in that same category as, as Austin Cindric. Starts in the back and just walks forward. I mean, almost runs forward. And manages tires at the same pace as well. And so you think, okay, well, what about the other JGR cars? See, the problem with doing that, and I think JGR has a little bit of hidden speed, is that Ty Gibbs had an issue, got in a wreck in the race. Martin Truex Jr. had a green flag penalty. Christopher Bell was pretty good running towards the top 10, but once he got mired in traffic at the end, really struggled. I don't think that the car necessarily was bad. Maybe they just got the setup a little bit wrong, and they got the setup a little bit wrong in traffic. But it's not completely clear because, again, Truex was great until his penalty. Gibbs may have been a contender, but he wrecked. And then Bell in traffic struggled. Meanwhile, Hamlin was one of probably top 3, top 5 in terms of tire management and having a fast car. So Cindric, loving this week. Hamlin, loving this week. Hendrick, I'm concerned with. Now, some of the more interesting plays that I didn't really think I was going to be thinking about or talking about are some of the numbers that popped up when I was analyzing the average lap times. So first, we'll just talk about the team in general. And that's last year with Shane Van Gisbergen, OSVG, and Daniel Hemrick. Now, there are two things that we could talk about here. Is that the old popular story that road course drivers know braking, and so they know short flat tracks, so they know Martinsville. And it's happened enough that we could probably believe in that theme by now. And Daniel Hemrick also a pretty good short track driver. So why did Colleague run so well? And then we can also throw in with Colleague. One of my thoughts is this, that, if you remember back in the early 2010s with Front Row Motorsports, where, the field, there was a huge disparity between haves and have-nots. And Front Row really invested a lot of their money in super speedways. They didn't bother with intermediate tracks, which made up the bulk of the races, because they just couldn't compete with the bigger teams. But outside of their super speedway investments, they would put resources into short tracks too. And you would see Front Row occasionally compete and put together some decent races. And that got me thinking about Colleague and that, all right, well, where do you want to put your resources if you're Colleague? There aren't as many intermediate tracks now. The field is a lot more even, so where you put your money actually matters. So it could be that Colleague is investing a little bit more in specific short tracks and really putting together some pretty solid cars. And in this race, when we look at fall off, tire management, sure, Hemrick and Van Gisbergen could be excellent Martinsville drivers. But I don't know if they're that much better than anyone else. I don't know if they're that much better in tire management than anyone else. But it also could be that Colleague put in a lot of time and investment ahead of time, being aware of this new soft tire. And you look at the tire management here for Van Gisbergen, it's better than a lot of these drivers up here in the top. He's running more consistent, faster lap times than anyone else. Better than him. Same thing with Hemrick. Not nearly as much fall off. Maybe it's they're not pushing it into the race and really trying to get that top 5 or top 10, but that's fine. If you got Ty Dillon at the end of the race running top 20, you don't really want him to eat his stuff, burn his stuff up. trying to get to 10th. Take the 20. Same thing with AJ. We don't really need AJ Allmendinger to win this weekend. Another road course driver that could be good at the short flat track. We like that. It's something we can definitely get behind. But either way, you look at these colored cars, and you look at their times, you look at their fall off, very solid. And I got SVG ranked number 2 in terms of tire fall off. Daniel Hendrick, 9th best when we factor in consistency. And this variable was, it's not just simply lap times. When we were running this analysis, we were also looking at, where were you running, what conditions. In fact, I'm not going to reveal all my cards, but it's not just simply looking at straight numbers. There was a fine-tuned process to do this calculation, proprietary knowledge. Something to look at. All right, another thing I want to talk about is the SHR void. So you look at these SHR cars, Gragson, Priest, Briscoe, Berry. We know that the SHR Fords have been strong over the last 5 years at short tracks, or really in the high horsepower package once upon a time, but even just at the short tracks. Well, now they're all gone. That means there's 4 spots that you're going to bump up for really anyone that previously you wouldn't consider. So what I'm asking you is think about some of the drivers that you're not really excited at, like a Ricky Stenhouse. Well, you take out 4 really fast cars, that could be 4 spots for Ricky Stenhouse. Or any of those drivers in the back of the pack that you may not normally trust. We've just vacuumed them out. We've vacuumed out 4 really fast cars. So that's something to think about this weekend and when you're doing your bumping up. One of those guys that could benefit that may not need to benefit is Austin Dillon, who's generally been pretty good at this racetrack. And then you look at last year, average running position of 9th, finishes 7th. Lap times are good, 20.92. So he had a fast car. And then you also have to factor in that Richard Boswell is going to be his crew chief. Who was Richard Boswell crew chief for? He was one of those SHR Ford crew chiefs who knew how to set up at the short tracks, in Gen 6 and in Gen 7. You can Google up his numbers if you want. Gregson struggled in the spring, but really rebounded, had a strong fall. He and Drew Blickensderfer have both transferred over to front row together. And Blickensderfer has put together, before Gregson, some pretty solid races at SHR Ford with Eric Almirola. Could be a big week for Gregson. Definitely going to be a top 10 contender along with Austin Dillon. Both have new crew chiefs, but both crew chiefs have strong records at this track. Someone that I wanted to be interested in, that I probably won't ultimately, is Todd Gilliland. You know that I really like Chris Lawson as a crew chief. Really was exceptional last year in his one season with Rick Ware. Surprised a lot of people, kind of brought that team to life. The year before that, he was with Front Row in the trucks, won some championships. He was with Todd Gilliland back in the day. And back in the day with Todd Gilliland, he led 133 laps at Martinsville. He led 55 laps with Zane Smith at Martinsville. Now, that was a little bit of pit road strategy. Still had a race-leading car. The only issue is that Lawson just hasn't had, and it's a small sample size, much success at Martinsville in the Cup Series. And that could be more of a Rick Ware situation. And you have to remember, though, there is a front row Penske alliance. And if we really like Penske, then this could be a weekend where you want to get some of that front row. We already like Gregson. Maybe Gilly's a possibility. I wish that Lawson would have had a better year with Rick Ware last year, but it's completely understandable that Rick Ware wasn't fast at Martinsville. Completely understandable. Speaking of Penske Alliance, we could also throw Josh Berry in that mix as well. Wood Brothers from Stewart, Virginia, just down the road. See, I live to the east in Danville. Wood Brothers are to the west of Martinsville and Stewart. Berry, running really well this year. Good short track racer. Has that famous Martinsville win that made his career. Could be a really big week for Josh Berry. The Berry people are going to be super excited. Last driver I want to talk about is Bubba Wallace. Not really his best track, but he's put together some decent results. I believe he got 4th, though, in the spring, 18th in the fall. But what we really like about Bubba Wallace is his new crew chief, Charles DeNike. Last year, Charles DeNike, crew chief in the Truck Series for Christian Eckes, swept both races, led 320 laps. DeNike understands this track. Could be a good weekend for Bubba Wallace. So hopefully this early week information will help you out with some of your early picks. Thanks for joining me here at the Fantasy NASCAR Podcast. RaceForThePrize.com, April package, just $25 or $200. And you just Venmo, PayPal, Cash App the money to me. And then I transfer the money over to my son, and he buys Happy Meals or dinosaur stuff. Really big into Jurassic Park at the moment. I mean, we've been through phases before: Pokemon, Paw Patrol, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, everything you could think of. But this dinosaur phase is like the biggest thing I've ever seen. It's almost, I hate to say this out loud, but we're almost getting to Asperger's type level. I won't lie, it does worry me a little bit. Like, you're a little too much into these dinosaurs. But I guess it's a natural phase for most kids to get into dinosaurs. But this kid knows every dinosaur name. Every one of them. I can't pronounce them. I'm a grown man. And this kid's got every dinosaur memorized. Even the fake dinosaurs in the cartoons and in the movies. It's, to be honest with you, worries me a little bit, but also makes me a little happy that he's a little nerd and really into something. But either way, $25 for April, and then I buy an overpriced Jurassic Park toy or a Happy Meal. More likely just a Happy Meal. Thanks for joining me. Martinsville, get pumped, get excited. Triple I's fantastic.